India's second largest conglomerate, the Adani Group, led by billionaire chairman Gautam Adani, has been making headlines recently. The multi-billion-dollar corporation, which consists of diverse businesses including port management, electric power, infrastructure, and much more, has been accused by US-based short seller Hindenburg Research in what has been described as the largest con in corporate history. A 100-page report by the forensic financial research firm accuses Adani Group of stock manipulation, unsustainable debt, and the use of tax havens, amongst others. The firm has a solid track record of finding corporate wrongdoings. Following this, Chairman Gautam Adani's net worth has fallen by a whopping $70 billion. Adani Group has lost $91.7 billion in value in 8 days, which means almost 40% of the empire's shares were wiped off in just over a week. In response, the Adani Group has rolled out a 413-page report responding to Hindenburg Research, refuting all allegations and claiming the report was a calculated attack on India, the independence, integrity, and quality of Indian institutions, and the growth story and ambition of India. They also launched legal actions against other foreign critics. In the studio today, we have gathered a panel of experts to discuss the future of the Adani Group and the ethical debate that has risen due to the scandal. To kick us off, I think the question on all of our minds is, should the Adani Group be allowed to continue as an unethical conglomerate?
Thanks for having us, Harwin. We maintain that Adani's practices are well within the boundaries of the law, but we do acknowledge that we are imperfect. That said, so is every company, and if we shut down all corporations simply because they are imperfect, we won't have any left. If we take a utilitarian approach, Adani is active in environmental conservation. So we have active waste management practices and water management practices. Adani Foundation is a core part of our practices as well. So who is to say that what happens in these areas is, less important than what is happening in the commercial sector? Are these things then negated because of a few allegations? We also have to consider the second-order consequences. We have over 20,000 individuals on our payroll. What is to become of them if we are shut down?
Even if the allegations are proven, shutting down a company like Adani is a big decision. The needs of the economy and its workers are massively important too. Corporations like Adani are simply too big to fail. The growth of our Indian economy is intertwined with the success of such companies. However, if these accusations are true, I believe the ideal solution would be to impose sanctions and fines on the decision makers to show the government's strict stance on unethical behavior. However, the Indian government's priority would be limiting the impact of this event, in particular ensuring that all affected workers have sufficient support.
Will such an approach really result in the greatest good for the greatest number of people?
That's a great point. Allowing companies that are potentially committing fraud to continue with operations is detrimental to both the economy and to society at large. How can the public really be sure that Adani's actions truly benefit society as you claim? Your organization's track record has not been without controversy. Environmental destruction from oil spills, allegations of bribery, and loss of life in your coal plants are just a few examples.
Actually, I would argue that it's less about the outcome and more about how we get there. In deontology, actions are considered moral because of some characteristic of the action itself, not a good outcome. Hence, if Adani is doing everything correctly, it should be allowed to exist and vice versa. So how do we determine what is right or wrong? We already have systems in place to do so. This is the basis of the law. It is the fundamental way in which we determine if a company is doing right or wrong.
That's interesting. So is it right to say that ethics and law are one and the same?
Well, no, not always, but when society wants to force conglomerates such as Adani to be ethical, we usually turn to the law. As a society where everyone has a different moral perspective, we have the law as a guideline for behavior. Thus, there is an undeniable point where the law and ethics blend into common standards of conduct. Therefore, unlike utilitarianism, this perspective argues that it does not matter whether Adani's actions may be perceived as bad, only if that they are lawful, they should be allowed to exist.
That's right. The legal system is certainly helpful in guiding corporations to behave ethically. But as Max mentioned, what is legal may not always be ethical. A prime example would be the sale of tobacco products. Because of its addictive nature and obvious health implications, the harm caused by tobacco extends beyond the individual. It affects society as a whole, and yet it remains legal. Hence, when relying on the law alone becomes difficult, perhaps we should turn to virtue ethics instead. In a business context, virtue ethics requires individuals to focus on developing their own character traits and cultivating a culture of ethical behavior within the organization. This approach emphasizes the importance of ethical behavior not just for its own sake, but also for businesses' long-term success. Businesses built on ethical behavior are more likely to establish trust and build strong relationships with its stakeholders, including customers, employees, and investors. Hence, we should judge Adani on whether their expertise and their actions are in line with good character traits. Yes, it is difficult to quantify what good character traits truly are in every situation, but traits like honesty, fairness, and integrity are some of the basic ones that guide ethical decision making. And because the management does not walk the talk with ethical behavior, virtuous traits are therefore not cultivated within the company.
If the allegations are proven, how should Adani manage this crisis?
Although no allegations have been proven, Adani's reputation has already taken a big hit. Our primary concern now is repairing our customers' trust in us.
Now, what Leah has described sounds like they are applying a crisis management lens to their current controversy. Adani is seeking to repair trust. According to the Trust Radar, they should show genuine empathy and understanding towards the various stakeholders and their concerns in the light of the aftermath. Subsequently, Adani needs to prove their commitment to resolving the issue, for example, by having senior executives like Gautam Adani himself address the report. They should also demonstrate transparency by being upfront about issues they were unaware of in the report. As such a large conglomerate, everyone knows that Adani is more than capable of conducting internal audits to ensure that procedures in the organization are lawful. Thus, they need to take responsibility and reassure stakeholders that they will rectify or properly disprove these allegations.
Having been in the media for a long time, perhaps I could add an insight of my own. As India's largest recent financial scandal, Adani falls under high societal importance and audience interest according to Barron's theory of media. Thus, Adani releasing a 413-page report doubling down on their defense is not palatable to the mass audience. Because of its in-depth and technical nature, it does little to keep the audience interest and instead comes across as defensive. They should appeal to the mass media by painting a story of the situation and addressing the public's concerns instead.
I would actually argue that history tells us that crisis management may not be the most effective way to go about it. In time, consumers will pick up when a company is disingenuous. Instead of only focusing on PR and reputation management, Adani should attend to the root of the problem. Perhaps Adani should adopt a CSR lens to do so. To apply a CSR lens, Adani Group should primarily consider how their recent actions have affected their stakeholders they are responsible for. Importantly, this would be the thousands of individuals who rely on the Adani CSR Foundation that are threatened if the company goes under.
Perhaps what Adani can do to enhance their social responsibility is to ensure that no more of such financial scandals can threaten its current CSR to its various stakeholders. The key strategy is to ensure that corruption is found and removed before it grows. Currently, all anonymous whistleblowing is reported to senior internal management who may have a vested interest while handling the matter and may not be fully transparent. Thus, Adani must create channels for whistleblowing to reach external stakeholders for investigation.
That is a great point. I would also like to add that perhaps ethical behavior must trickle down from the top. By making time for their employees, Adani's managers can closely manage the operations and ensure that ethical behavior is enforced on all levels of the operations.
This begs the question, if Adani could have been perfectly socially responsible, why didn't they do so in the first place? I argue that it could be the nature of the business environment that encourages such corruption. Adani has many different business activities that link to the government. They generate electricity, manage ports, and have mining operations to name a few. Yet the Indian government itself encouraged such corruption to happen. In a society where its governance incentivizes unfair play to get ahead, can we really blame these companies for the way they turn out? Look at Harshad Mehta and how corrupt officials aided him in manipulating the stock market.
Yeah, I agree with Max. Ideally, despite external influence, companies should follow a CSR code. However, we must acknowledge that in reality, there are many factors at play, especially in India's somewhat corrupt environment. If corruption is embedded into the system, can Adani really be expected to be perfect? Take the IKEA controversy, for example. IKEA may try its best to eliminate child labour use, but will their context really allow them to do so? Perhaps while we should do our best in CSR efforts, what should be examined first is the foundations that our businesses are built upon.
We've heard a lot of interesting suggestions for ways to move forward. In an ideal world, we can hold large conglomerates like Adani accountable and ensure they're operating ethically and legally. Yet, given the complex nature of India's corporate landscape, it's safe to say we aren't holding our breath. Now, we invite you to join the discussion. Our panelists are here to answer any questions you have.